Hello and welcome everyone to the first of our Cleared for Takeoff webinars. My name's Alison Wheel. I'm a Knowledge Counsel at Watson Farley Williams, and I'll be introducing all of our sessions for this series of webinars. Just a couple of points of housekeeping first of all. The session is being recorded, and if you do have any questions as we go through the session, then please feel free to put those into the Q&A function at the bottom of your screens. I'll keep an eye on those and hopefully we will be able to get to some of those later on in the session. So for the eagle-eyed among you, you'll have noticed the Jane Austen theme that we had in respect of our webinars. And I have to say, when looking at this first one, Pride and President, I first thought that maybe the link was somewhat tenuous. But on greater reflection, I do actually see some similarities between Donald Trump, President of the US, and our favourite Regency literary hero, Mr. Darcy. Both have an initial perception of being proud, some might even say arrogant. Both are extremely wealthy and influential in their domains. Both are strong-willed and unapologetic. They tend to speak without filters. And finally, I don't think either of them are particularly subtle. A quote from Mr. Darcy, "She is tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me." A quote from Mr. Trump, "I alone can fix it." But of course, the main difference between the two is that Mr. Darcy didn't really have much impact on the aviation industry, and that's what we're here to talk about today. And so I'm pleased to introduce you to our two speakers. Firstly, we've got Dominic Pearson, who's a partner here at Watson Farley Williams in the aviation and aerospace team. He has extensive experience advising many participants in aviation finance and leasing transactions. He's one of the principal advisors to the Aviation Working Group and is currently the vice chair of the AWG's Legal Advisory Panel. And Dominic has also spent some time living and working in the US. And then joining Dominic, we also have Adam Pilarski. Adam is the president of AVITAS and was previously chief economist and director of strategic planning for McDonnell Douglas. Prior to that, Adam had an academic career, which included teaching economics at California State University. I've had the pleasure of listening to Adam speak at conferences before, so I know that we're in for a treat today. And so with that in mind, I'm going to hand over to Adam to tell us a little bit more about himself and also to provide us with his views on our subject matter for today.
Thank you, Alison. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And thank you for Watson Farley for having me here. In case you don't realize it, we are facing more uncertainties every moment. I didn't check news today yet. I don't know what other country we are ready to liberate and make it another state of the US, or so I'm behind. I'm probably 12 hours behind the latest news. Going back to history, I'm glad that you went to Jane Austen. That was 1813. I remember it well. Was quite a young man then. And I'm also glad to realize that the title here, president, doesn't go to me as president of AVITAS. We are talking about V. Donald, so it's a very different story. So why am I a speaker? I have no idea, but I was asked. I'm an overeducated academic economist who wants to understand why things are happening. A lot of strange developments are happening in the world, and we are trying to figure out why is it? Why is all of this happening? Luckily, after my academic career, I I had a whole bunch of children, so I decided that children need not just prestige, but also material goods. So started working in the industry, and as Alison mentioned, I was chief economist, director of strategic planning for McDonnell Douglas. At one time, we had 150,000 people, so kind of a big business. And I think I know how big businesses think. In 1997, we were liberated by Boeing, we McDonnell Douglas, and I confused the two Washingtons. Instead of going to Seattle, Washington State, I went to Washington, D.C., and worked for a company called AVITAS, which is the largest valuation company in aviation. So where are we and what can we understand what's happening? Important to understand that the economy has many goals. Most people think economic only means efficiency. If something is the cheapest, that's the only goal of economics. No, it's four goals: efficiency, growth, stability, and equality. And why is this important? Because over the last number of years, we were mainly stressing efficiency. And number of years we moved away. We are now around the world doing deglobalization. Efficiency meant all the cheap products are produced in the most efficient place in the world. China, Vietnam, other places. We had Brexit, speaking about the UK. We have huge changes in the world. The impact of this is that inflation is here to stay. So if somebody believes it will go away, no, that is not going away. Globalization is taking a step back. We also want cleaner environment, which is more expensive and so on. Supposed to talk about tariffs. It's a very old idea, and it's a form of taxation, but it's an inefficient form of taxation. Why? Because we only tax people that buy something that comes from foreign lands. Luckily, governments discovered that there are more efficient, smarter ways to take money away from us. So, for example, in the US in 1913, we had the 16th Amendment to the Constitution, which established income tax. And if you know something about American history, in 1773, we had the Boston Tea Party, which was a movement against paying tariffs to the UK. At around a similar time, 1820, there was a very famous British economist, David Ricardo, who wrote about the Corn Laws. And he wrote about what's called comparative advantage. Why should the farmers of the UK be protected when the country was moving towards industry away from agriculture? He was saying, we in the UK, we around the world should do what we know best how to do, instead of protecting the people, the inefficient people who used to do it for a long time. So you had two different approaches. You had the Latin American approach, which said imports bad. If we import something, we should have import substitution. We should produce it at home. We can produce it ourselves. Uh, and then you have the Southeast Asian approach, which said, a perfect example, Singapore, city-state that has to import everything. And how can they do it? Because they also export. What can they export? What they are best at. Instead of protecting an industry, they said, let's develop what we know how to do best. And you had countries like Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and so on, all develop. A lot of economic theories around. If you look at evidence, it was very clear. Latin American countries were constantly in need of bailout from the IMF. They had huge inflations. Bad things were happening. The industries they were protecting, it's called the infant industry argument, named by a famous Argentinian economist, Raúl Prebisch. You protect an infant until the infant can start walking and doing things. And then people do cartoons of a sumo wrestler and baby sumo wrestler in a crib. So what happened with tariffs? Again, in the US in 1929, we had a Great Depression. Stock market crashed. To get out of it, we, the country, decided to protect local producers. Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930, which increased tariffs so that we protect local producers. Surprise, surprise, others did the same to us. And in few years, we had over 25% unemployment. So I think economists are fairly clear about it. Relying on comparative advantage is the right way to go. Needless protectionism is not the right way to go. Which way are we going now? Well, the US has a strange policy because our great leader, who we'll see how well he'll do in his romantic life, still following the movies and the books that I remember reading. But things right now don't look good because, again, Mr. Trump believes game theory, zero-sum game. Every conflict, every negotiation is you lose, I win. It's a zero sum. In real life, again, remembering from McDonnell Douglas, big company, no, it's not all zero sum. We all can be better off, or we all can be worse off if we don't know what we are doing. So we do hope that sanity will prevail. Clearly, Texas, because fentanyl is being imported or we have illegal immigrants, that has nothing to do with tariffs. We are using tariffs because we, the US, are the largest importer in the world. And we are the bully. We can do it to others. Interestingly, in 1930s, we, the US, actually had a huge trade surplus. It was very, very different than now. Right now, Germany, China are the countries that produce more than they consume. We Americans are very happy to consume more than we produce, and we can always pay for it because we print more green pieces of paper that say "In God we trust." In case you think it's all negative, I want to end with 3 positives. One, I think these developments are good for lawyers. So whoever listens and is a lawyer or people who are putting this together, Watson Farley, I think it's good for you guys. Anytime there are more conflicts, some win, some lose. And going back to my 40 years of China, I'm kind of saying something that isn't 100% right for those who really know China, but the word conflict, Wei Ji, has 2 elements, and one is danger and one is opportunity. So supposedly, if you put them together, a crisis can be a danger, can be an opportunity. On the other hand, after 40 years, my Chinese is I still don't get the tones. So if you do it the wrong way, Wei Ji should be first tone, but if you go into 4th tone, it actually will mean hello chicken. So that's why you hire lawyers who will explain to you how to have the right crisis and not say hello chicken. Dominic, I'm done, ready for your brilliance and questions of the audience, or your questions.
Thank you very much, Adam, for such a comprehensive introduction to various topics that are germane to what we're talking about today. We'll talk about a number of things in the time that we have left in relation to the impact the Trump presidency is having on the aviation sector. But I thought we'd stick with tariffs just for a few moments longer, maybe more than a few moments.
Please do.
I think the first thing to say is everything is in a state of flux still, and not just that, but the dust hasn't settled on the most recent changes. So when we talk about tariffs and their impact, I think there is a lot that remains to be seen over the next several years, depending on how long lasting they are. And of course, there could be, are very likely to be, further changes ahead, not just from the Trump administration, but also from the reaction of other major trading blocs from around the world. And in particular, what impact, when you throw all of that into the melting pot, what impact that has for the aviation industry. Just to sort of anchor the US tariffs in where they emanate from in terms of US law, and just to summarize where we are currently, broadly speaking, there are 3 categories of tariffs that Trump has announced and enacted since the start of his second term. The first and perhaps the most famous, thanks to the tariff board that was on the White House lawn, are the reciprocal tariffs. So these were enacted by executive order by Trump pursuant to the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, and came into effect on April 5th of this year. These tariffs apply to aircraft and aircraft equipment, including engines and parts, and none of those benefit from any exclusions or exemptions. The rate of the tariffs that were applied were a baseline of 10%, with higher tariffs on an individual country-by-country basis, from between 10 and 50%. These higher tariffs were initially effective from the 9th of April, but are currently subject to a 90-day pause or moratorium. And it is those individual tariffs that apply on a country-by-country basis that everyone remembers from that board on the White House lawn. So, in theory at least, when the 90-day moratorium expires, these higher rates of tariffs on a country-by-country basis will come back into effect. However, the exception here is China, because the tariffs levied on Chinese goods were not subject to the 90-day moratorium. And in respect of Chinese products under the reciprocal tariffs, these were initially subject to a 34% rate. Then after several rounds of tit-for-tat retaliation, these have now risen to 125%. It's important to mention as well that Canada and Mexico were not affected by the reciprocal tariffs, but they were affected by other tariffs, which we'll get onto in a moment. And the other thing to note is, of course, that these tariffs are cumulative. They stack on top of each other. So the reciprocal tariffs are in addition to any other tariffs that might apply. So moving on swiftly to the second category of tariffs that were imposed since the start of the year. These are the so-called fentanyl tariffs. These were also enacted by executive order under the same statute. The justification being the import and export of fentanyl in respect of Canada and Mexico, to whom they apply, and also illegal immigration from those two countries. And in respect of China, to whom they apply as well, the production of fentanyl. So that's why they've been given the name the fentanyl tariffs. So these tariffs carry a rate of 25% on all goods, except in the case of Canada and Mexico, for goods qualifying under the rules of origin of the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. And any goods that qualify and are certified under that agreement are exempt from these tariffs. So aircraft engines and parts which satisfy those rules of origin and are certified are not subject to the fentanyl tariffs. But if they do not have a certificate of origin, or they do not originate from Mexico or Canada, then the 25% rate of tariffs applies for these aircraft sector goods. So coming back to China, who is feeling a lot of pain from these tariffs, when you add the 125% that apply pursuant to the reciprocal tariffs to the fentanyl tariffs, you reach a total rate of 145%, which is an extremely high rate of tariffs for Chinese goods. The third category of tariffs, and probably the least talked about, are the so-called Section 232 duties on steel and aluminium, or aluminum, depending on whether you prefer the British or American pronunciation. Now, these tariffs were initially imposed by Trump during his first term in 2018, and they applied a tariff or duty of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminium. At that time, some mainly Western trading partners negotiated bilateral agreements to reduce or eliminate those tariffs. And also some general exclusions were established. However, on March 12th of this year, Trump, by executive order, rescinded all of those bilateral agreements and removed all of those exclusions. And at the same time, he raised the rate of tariffs on aluminium from 10% to 25%. So we now have 25% tariffs under Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 that applies to steel and aluminium content in all goods, including aircraft, engines, and parts. Now, before sort of talking a bit about the impact these tariffs have with Adam, just a quick note on something called the Civil Aircraft Agreement, which came into effect in 1980. Now, this is a plurilateral agreement that was entered into by 33 states, including the US, the EU, and the UK, under the auspices of the World Trade Organization, or WTO. Now, under this agreement, the contracting states agreed to remove duties on civil aircraft equipment, including the aircraft themselves, engines, parts, and repairs. However, this agreement itself is between states. And so if any state believes that the United States is in breach of this agreement, the remedy is for the other states to sue the United States through the WTO's dispute resolution mechanism. That mechanism is flawed because the United States a few years ago refused to cooperate in the appointment of replacement persons sitting on the tribunal. So that mechanism is ineffective. In addition, the civil aircraft agreement is not a self-executing agreement for the purposes of US federal law. So it doesn't have any domestic US law effect, not without either a congressional approval or an executive approval. So while this agreement purports to exclude from the scope of the recent round of sanctions civil aircraft and their equipment, it is not effective in doing so. It might be possible for certain parties, states and maybe private persons, to mount some sort of legal challenge, but the agreement itself does not exclude or exempt sanctions. Alison, did you want to say something on that point?
No, carry on.
Okay. So I mentioned this because it's come up in a few conversations we've had with clients and others within the industry. And I don't think as an immediate, it's not going to provide an immediate silver bullet for any of this. In addition to that, I believe the stance of the United States government is to say, well, we're allowed to derogate from any such agreement on the grounds of national security. And, you know, we think, excuse me, we think that the imposition of these sanctions fall within that exclusion. And it's up to us to decide what constitutes a national security reason. So that's the legal background of where we are in relation to US tariffs, or at least the most recent round of those tariffs. Let's talk a little bit about the response from other trading blocs to those tariffs. And I'll sort of give a brief legal reaction, and then we can jump into some conversation with Adam to get his thoughts from a sort of a wider macro economic standpoint. So taking
Yeah,
first,
Dominic, just
yeah,
to interrupt there, if when you are thinking about your response there, Adam, we've had a couple of questions in, and it may require getting your crystal ball out. But if you could also consider how you think the tariff situation would develop, and also if you think that Liberation Day is a negotiation tactic targeting mainly China, and that Trump will eventually back down from the 145% tariff, or will he actually follow through after the 90-day pause? So if you could think about that in your answers a little later, that would be great.
It's already in my notes. Thank you. And it's a good question.
So very quickly, the response from the EU has been retaliatory but measured. The EU has done a couple of things already and has quite a few tools at its disposal, including its recent anti-coercion instrument that equips it to respond quite effectively and flexibly going forward. So I don't think we've seen the full extent of the EU's retaliation or response to the US sanctions yet. It has imposed some retaliatory tariffs as a result of the Section 232 duties that I mentioned earlier, and the bilateral agreement the US have with the EU on that coming to an end. So the UK, has launched a consultation process that I believe will be ending very soon, but as yet has taken a more conciliatory tone with an eye to a US-UK trade agreement. So no substantive response from the UK yet. From Canada, there have been a limited number of retaliatory tariffs that have been imposed, none of which relate to the aviation sector. But the idea of those tariffs is to target the things that Americans like the most that come from Canada. Mexico has had no response yet. And then finally, China, and perhaps most infamously, has matched the reciprocal tariffs, imposing tariffs of its own. And on the 15th of April, and I don't know whether this is still in effect, but on the 15th of April, it was reported to have ordered all Chinese airlines not to take any delivery of Boeing aircraft. And famously, there was that one aircraft recently that was turned back upon its attempted delivery by Boeing to one of the Chinese airlines. China has also indicated that it may respond with non-tariff related responses, such as export restrictions. So turning now to the impact that all of this has on the aviation industry. Adam, what is your view on how this affects the delivery pipelines, first of all, for Airbus and Boeing? I appreciate we're sort of only a month or two after the effects, and so maybe the data so far is not statistically significant, but what's your prediction looking at Boeing and Airbus and their pipeline for both US?
Good question. Too bad that there are too many moving parts in it. But again, the Donald wrote the book, The Art of a Deal. So for him, it's the art of a deal. How do I buy a piece of real estate? He never ran a big business where you have to plan in advance. You mentioned the plane being turned back. I was actually in Seattle at a presentation to 120 Boeing executives, while somebody said, oops, China is just sending the plane back. So yes, this is real. It's more than it's real. I talked to many economists in the industry. And our main thing is, how will the economy do this year and how will aviation do this year? Last year, half a year ago, nobody talked about a recession. Our first quarter was negative. Number of economists I talked to, including Barclays, JP Morgan, I mean, real people, are now saying there's a reasonable chance of a so far shallow recession. The tariffs are changing things. They are driving us in a clearly negative way. And administration was now saying, instead of admitting, yeah, things won't be as good, are saying, do you really need $30? $3 are enough. That's a nice way of saying your standard of living will be lower with it. Now, China is playing it interestingly, because the Western world and Japan realize that they have to massage the ego of some person, and who his biggest claim to fame is 170 countries want to renegotiate, negotiate, meaning they're coming to me. I am important. Who cares? Again, people learned it doesn't cost much to say, for Mexico to say, we'll put another 20,000 soldiers on the border. Mr. Trump is happy. The Chinese play it very interestingly and very differently. They don't come and say, we want to renegotiate. They're actually saying, wait, negotiations come at lower level. Once these people reach agreement, it goes to the great leaders who approve it. So far, Mr. Trump was saying Xi Jinping or Mr. Xi is very smart. He will want a deal. Mr. Xi is quiet. He doesn't play the game. It will have to be resolved. Obviously, tariffs of 120, 140% don't make any sense. And obviously, Mr. Trump uses his techniques from real estate deals, coming with ridiculous ideas, so that at the end, he'll come with a reasonable one. But when you think about big businesses in aviation, big businesses, you need certainty. If you want to make investments, you need to know what production will be in 2 years and 3 years, what the conditions are. And we are not providing it now. And because of this, if you follow, you probably don't, airlines in the US just had the earnings calls, and they all are reducing the guidance, and they are saying things are slowing down. People are less willing to travel. Why? Because there's uncertainty. And I think this is real. This is very real. It's not a game. It's not a deal. Eventually, sanity will prevail. How did I survive to be as old and useless as I am now? By being optimistic. See the smile?
I think, and obviously we being WFW operate in a particular corner of the market, but I think we are seeing these transaction volumes calm in the first
That's a nice way of phrasing it.
And perhaps that trend will continue in the short term. But as you say, these things have a way of, private enterprise has a way of adapting to market conditions. And so medium, long term, we'll see.
Adam, what do you think would be the impact on aircraft market valuations if the tariff situation lasts for the long term? That's one question we've had from the audience.
That's interesting because, again, that's what AVITAS, my firm, our firm, does. It's a more complicated story than a simple answer. Partially because we had a lot of strange developments in aviation. We had a huge bubble, we had new technologies, we had luckily incompetent manufacturers, both Airbus, Boeing, and the engine people who didn't deliver as many planes. We had disasters with Boeing. So we did have a bubble of orders, but we were saved by the fact that manufacturers didn't deliver what they were supposed to. Because of these valuations in the short term, there are no planes to be had today. Planes that were retired, like the Airbus 380s, are coming back because we just don't have enough planes. Yes, this is in a couple of years, it will be resolved. But right now, short-term valuations are doing really well. At least lease rates, if you are an airline or an operator and you want planes, temporary lease rates went up. Values went up a little, but not that much, because we know that in a couple of years, we will get back to balance.
And Adam, do you think there might be a divergence of pricing depending on whether you're talking about a Boeing aircraft or an Airbus aircraft, or do you think everything comes out in the wash and they'll largely be the same because of...
I think that from a tariff and political point of view, it will wash because everything is more complicated. European planes have sometimes engines that are produced in the US, a whole bunch of parts. So it's impossible to say this is a pure American plane or pure European plane, even if it's produced in Toulouse or in Mobile, Alabama, or Seattle. Interesting question is, will the Chinese COMAC establish a better presence? And Ryanair recently started talking about maybe thinking back about buying COMAC planes. So there are many long-term changes also. Again, the US policy of Europe doesn't spend enough on defense will lead to less demand in the future for US aircraft on the military side. Hopefully Europe, not hopefully, Europe is learning the lesson and will start developing their own planes more, put more resources into it. In the long run, it's not good for American employment, but some people in the administration don't see it.
So I'm conscious of time, and it'd be good to try and cover a couple of other topics here.
Please.
And so maybe sticking with people, and focusing on the airline traffic within the United States. Do you think, Adam, that the recent changes to immigration policy will have an impact on putting off foreign visitors to the United States, and in turn, whether that's for business or for tourism, and in turn that having a dampening effect on passenger numbers and the US airlines' own businesses within the US? I mean, just anecdotally, I hear from time to time others making that comment to me, but I wonder what your view is from an economic perspective.
It's not just economic, but looking at data, yes, it has an impact. Canadians surprisingly don't want to be liberated and become North Montana or whatever we will call the new state. And they're figuring out they can go to other places. But as everything else, it gets more complicated because it's also the value of the dollar. So European tourists coming, there's clearly a slowdown. Every June, there's an air show in Paris. Every 2 years, this year it's in Paris, and then every other year it's in Farnborough. The industry gets together. I just purchased tickets to go to Paris, and then I want to add a place, tourism in Europe. Last place I haven't visited, which is Albania. So Dominic, you will have to be my tour guide and explain what I do in Albania. But yes, there's less tourism, there's a slowdown. Airlines are nervous about it because they don't like uncertainty. And out of a deal creates more uncertainty. So it is very, very clear. The evidence is very clear. You talk to airline people. Now, those who are leasing companies who are our customers, probably your customers, are quite happy because they bought planes. Because of shortages, value of their planes went up. Everybody is dying to have planes right now. They are, technical term, in hog heaven. They are very happy, but no doubt in my mind and in the mind of most analysts I talk to, slowdown is coming, and that includes traffic. And that includes the political elements of international travel.
And I suppose, sticking with the US airlines, maybe one positive of the Trump presidency is a more relaxed approach from the Department of Justice for airline mergers from an antitrust perspective. Whether that merger, whether any such mergers or consolidation is a good thing or bad thing from the point of view of the passenger, I suppose, is a complicated question. But for the airline industry within the United States, that could present some opportunities that maybe did not present themselves prior to the start of this year.
No doubt, last administration also was very supportive of mergers, and for years we allowed mergers to go ahead. Is it good? Well, not for consumers, but for airlines, probably. We do not believe in competition in the airline industry. And the one beacon kind of we do things differently, Southwest, totally change its mantra. They become, did we ever say everybody is equal, first come, first? They didn't have assigned seats, first come, first serve. No, we change. We are in it for the money, and we will get as much as we can from everybody, assigned seat, special seat. Here's a special seat for Dominic because he paid more, and stewardesses will not spit in his food. Here is the cheap seat for Adam, go in the back. So yeah,
Okay.
it will continue. It will continue.
I just want to say a brief word about sanctions before moving into questions and answers. I realize we're towards the end of our session.
You have 7 minutes.
I have 7 minutes, so I'll try and keep sanctions brief to 1 minute or two. We have received a few questions, not as far as I'm aware on the webinar so far, but prior to this point, relating to sanctions. It's possible, of course, that the United States, given its sort of warmer position towards Russia, may loosen sanctions depending on what peace deal comes out of the process, which will create non-alignment between the EU in particular and the US as regards Russia, and whether that non-alignment may create any problems. My personal view is probably not, or at least its impact will be tempered. We've had to deal with non-alignment anyway because of the difference in sanctions for Iran between the EU and other parts of the world and the US on the other hand. So if there's, from an incremental standpoint, more non-alignment when it comes to Russia, I think either from a industry standpoint, you'll either seek to comply across the board as much as possible, or there will be workarounds for that non-alignment as there are currently. So I don't think any non-alignment of sanctions will have that much of a profound effect when it comes to our industry, particularly leasing and financing of aircraft. Adam, I don't know whether you want any final words on that topic before we switch to...
On sanctions, yeah, I think, as you know, I believe you have the best sanction lawyers in the world. So
we certainly do, yeah.
So anybody, please contact Watson Farley on questions on sanctions.
Great. That's probably a good time to switch back to you, Alison, to field any questions that we haven't yet answered.
Okay, so I think we've probably got time for 2 more with some quick responses, please, both of you. So the FT reported this morning that the EU is considering imposing tariffs on Boeing jets as a retaliatory measure if insufficient progress is made on reducing US levies. What impact could this have on aircraft-backed securities, particularly those exposed to Boeing residual value risk? So that's the first question, please.
Obviously negative. Any uncertainty is not good in this case, and it will continue until we have more clarity, until we understand that there's a cost to uncertainty. I mean, businesses want more certainty. If you ever work in a big business, you do want predictability. And if you don't have it, you are suffering.
Adam, do you think, though, based on our previous discussion, do you think that any negative effect from that uncertainty will be more than made up for by a lack of supply in the market, and therefore that actually, you know, when you combine all the factors together, yes, okay, this might have, from an incremental point of view, a negative effect, but will it be significant, or is it just a case of, well, it depends what the EU does and how profound its retaliation is?
We don't know yet. That's my point is, one, we don't know what the specific actions will be. And again, the Smoot-Hawley Act of 1930 that I mentioned wasn't designed to drive us into a really deep recession. It was supposed to help workers. Instead, we got over 25% unemployment as it cascades down and more and more. We hope it will not go this way, but we don't know yet. My general comment was, we don't know what the end result will be, but we know that the uncertainty is reducing incentives to invest. Even if people come to the White House and have a photo shoot with the president and announce the 17th time that they will put in $50 billion in the US in the year 2525, if man is still alive. Okay.
Okay, and final question
You
then,
had
Adam.
second question.
Yeah, Adam, you once famously forecast that oil prices would fall to $40 a barrel, whilst investment banks were predicting $200 a barrel. Do you see a scenario where oil falls back to around $40 again to provide the industry with some cost relief?
In the longer run, yes, you are right. I was very controversial years ago when I told Boeing, Airbus not to spend so much money on the new engines and the new technologies, which caused a lot of problems because they were saying oil will stay high forever. And because of this, we need to spend additional money to get more fuel-efficient planes. In the longer run, as many people are driving electric cars, we have more oil available and prices will have to come down. Now, again, politics gets in. The Chinese, who are leaders in electric cars, are not so much allowed to sell in Europe with proposed high tariffs, and I have no idea in the US. But yeah, in the longer run, the same way as coal disappeared, and it's a big part of the UK history, oil will disappear.
Okay, thank you. I think we more or less covered most of the questions in one way or another. If there are any that haven't been covered you'd like to ask us, please feel free to email us and we can liaise with Adam and provide you with a response. So thank you all for attending what I hope has been an interesting and informative session. Thanks to Dominic and to Adam for giving up your time to speak with us today. The next webinar in the series is going to be on June the 3rd. And in that one, we'll be trying to make some sense of the sustainability issues that are facing the industry at the moment. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon, morning, or evening.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and everybody for listening.